And this transpires in jobs, it transpires in the kingdom, that there's certain things that I've watched over the years, that there's areas that are very common for men to change their standard, change their reference, their perspective shifts, and it's very noticeable if you're looking for it, that you can see something without as a pastor, you're always looking at people's lives and you're wondering why they do certain things, why they don't, and you just note and you watch over time, and you see areas where people can begin to build in their own way. They begin to take on their own perspective. They begin to take on their own way of doing things, where God calls us to what is pleasing to Him, not my perspective of what pleases Him, not the way that I think is best, but what is the way He's put in place? Okay, He's put a pastor over me. I can't go around that, though I have relationship with all sorts of different men that I can go to, that I can talk to. It doesn't replace who God has put as my pastor. It doesn't replace what He says. It's like, this is the way He wants it, and that's the way we'll do it. I've had my opinions, I've had my thinking, I've had my thoughts, and doesn't matter. I'll offer the advice, but ultimately it's up to you. Until you pull out a gun, tell me to shoot myself or something. But it is a stewardship. He has a responsibility, so that's in place. In ministries, there's responsibility, there's stewardship. That if I'm not in charge of the drama, if I'm not in charge of the band, if I'm not in charge of the play, if I'm not in charge, then I come under whoever is there, whoever it is. I've had where I've led a band and my pastor was in the band, but I was in charge. It didn't make, well, Pastor, since I'm in charge of the band, I'd like to tell you some things about your ministry, what I think you could do better. And no, he put himself in a place where I was making the calls, and it was very strange, very different. But he said, no, this is what I want you doing. And so in the midst of that, he's observing the man that he's discipling. He's observing what type of steward is he? What is his perspective? How does he treat people? How does he work in the setting he's in? Does he have the best interest of the church, of the setting, of these people, of the ministry? So these are areas where we are called to work and not losing sight of true ownership. True ownership is God. I don't go around the ministry leader. I don't go around, I don't go around someone that's in charge, and I adjust, I calibrate according to what that setting is, because ultimately it's what God has put in place. Another struggle that people can have when it comes to stewardship, and possibly why the man would lose perspective, is we lose sight of an accountability. I'm going to be held accountable for how I fulfilled that responsibility. This man is being held accountable. We are all going to be held accountable, not just to God, but how did we function with what God put in place? How did we function in the setting that God put us in? I'm faithful, I'm doing everything I'm supposed to do. But that applies out to other people, which God greatly cares about. How do I interact with the people God's put in charge, with leadership, with those under me? How do I interact with them? How do I interact with the vision that has been given? So there's an account for what God gives you and I. He's given us the Word of God. We're going to be held accountable for what we've done with what we've heard preached for the past 5, 10, 15, 20, 30, 35 years. He's going to hold us accountable versus somebody that may have only ever heard that you just need to come to church. And they may be, that's all they've ever heard. Just come to church. But we've heard a lot more. We're accountable for that. And Romans 14:12 speaks to this.
Then every one of us shall give account of himself to God.
All right? We're going to give account. It's not just singular. Well, I'm going to give account for myself, how I've lived and how I've done it and what I've done, how well I've done. We're going to give account to God for how we've done that. We're going to give account to God for what we've done with what He's given us and what we've done in the setting that He's placed us within the church. I've been in the Rochester church, I've been in the Cape church, I've had the St. Augustine church, there's the church in Chicopee. Every one of those, a different situation, different setting, and accountable in very different facets in each. And yet in each of those places accountable. Sometimes absolute brand new convert. You have a certain accountability, certain things you don't even understand. Then you're put in a position where you're on the board. Then you're put in a position where you're a pioneer pastor. And you're accountable to the home church. And you're accountable to the pastor who sent you out. And I've been accountable to Pastor Campo. And accountable coming here to Chicopee. There's an accountability to the people, to the congregation, to what was handed, to the vision. You can't just run with your own vision. And all of these different aspects we're accountable for. Whatever place God has us and where He's put us, and in that setting, people below us, beside us, around us, peers, pastors, etc. We can't just build our own little kingdom and, I can't just say, well, I have a relationship with Pastor Mitchell and Pastor Greg and Pastor Jesse. It's irrelevant. Well, that's fine. That's a blessing. But what is your responsibility? My responsibility to the Chicopee Church, to my wife, to my children, to my family, to God, to my peers, to my pastor. These are the things that are going to hold a greater weight to my heart, my actions. Matthew 24:48 through 50.
But if that evil servant says in his heart, my master is delayed in his coming, and begins to beat his fellow servants, and to eat and drink with the drunkards, the master of that servant will come on a day when he is not looking for him, and in an hour when he is not aware of. Okay, so what this is basically a picture of is when our focus becomes today. Our focus becomes right now, today, what I'm dealing with today, what matters today, and losing sight of what really matters, or when our focus is only this life and not eternity. When our focus becomes just now, it's like, got to take care of things and problems in business. And God understands all of that and does not release us from the responsibility of eternal things. Doesn't just say, you're busy right now, you're dealing with some things right now. Pastor Lamb losing his son was not released from a responsibility to God. He didn't go into hiding for years and, come out. He continued. I have a call. There's a need. Pastor Mitchell, I remember preaching, getting the report his grandson had passed during that day where he's on the Cape, and he stands up just shortly after hearing the news and preaches and brings victory and brings joy and brings a great report. And I'm sure in his heart, sad at what transpired, but well, there's responsibility. It doesn't get negated because of difficulty, because of preference. And so this is a responsibility. Our focus, not losing sight of the eternal, and our focus being upon this life, we can't allow that to happen. So big picture is that we lose sight of the true value of, there was a losing of sight of the true value of money. This uniquely speaks to money, uniquely speaks to resources, and Jesus was telling this parable because of a common heart condition. Luke 16:13.
No servant can serve two masters, for either he will hate the one and love the other, or else he will be loyal to the one and despise the other. You cannot serve God and mammon.
Okay, mammon. What is mammon? I'm sure there's somebody here knows. Mammon. Sis?
The money, God of money.
The God of money, okay? And it's one of the few times God actually puts something in contrast to him. The devil doesn't even get that place. Money has a pull, and money becomes a god. Money can become a god to people. Ephesians 5:5.
For this you know that no whoremonger, nor unclean person, nor covetous man who is an idolater has any inheritance in the kingdom of Christ and of God.
Okay, an idol is something we place our trust in. We place our trust, our confidence. My confidence is in this. That happens with money. When there's no money, we're forced to trust God. When money comes in, we can begin to have a subtle shift in our confidence. And an idol is something that demands service and allegiance.
It demands that we follow it, that we follow the dictates, and this is a great struggle. There was a generation that didn't much live on credit. We live very much on credit, and so this is the way we function. This is the way we think. This is the way we operate. Anybody know how much we are in debt as a nation? Any clue on that? Hav?
I want to say above 10 trillion.
Okay, it's actually above that, but here's the interesting thing. It's 2 years worth of our gross national product. 2 years of everything we have as income, 2 years worth, which means you can't catch up. That's where it's at. 2 years worth of everything that we produce, and that wouldn't even pay off the debt. That's substantial. That means 2 years of you going to work, you're in such debt. 2 years if everything you made went to pay off your debt and you still couldn't do it. And so, amen, the last days, end times, and a nation that desperately needs God. Not just to get it out of financial debt, but money can become a god. It demands, it rules. Well, we will allow this to be what we have allegiance to. Matthew 6:24, no one can serve two masters. He will either hate the one and love the other, or else he'll be loyal to the one and despise the other. All right, I'm going to be, I'll follow God, but there's a little bit of resentment because God's interfering with what I really want to do. God's interfering with my finances. You cannot serve God and mammon. God and his will, the imagery and what's pictured in this, when you understand what he's speaking of, is that God and his will is no longer in the highest place. That's not the priority. And God becomes lesser, subservient to our desires. Well, what I want to do, how I want to do it, the timing of what I want to do, and he's pulled down as far as the priority. And we can justify these things. We can justify the reasons. We can always come up with something valid. I had people, when I first got here, I had people telling me they weren't going to be involved because they wanted the people to be able to be loyal to me, and they wanted to back away so that the people would be loyal to me. Like, sounds very spiritual. But that's not, we can make things sound spiritual. We can give them a flavor, a religious tone. I'm doing this for the Lord, which I won't argue with you. Doesn't mean I agree with you. Doesn't mean I'm giving you a nod like my approval's on that. You didn't ask me about my approval. You told me what you're going to do. It's like, okay, that's what you're going to do. I'll pray for you. But this is something that you can't serve God and mammon. And God no longer in this individual's life that we're reading about was in the highest place. And Jesus is telling this story, and things are out of place. And God has become subservient to desires, is the imagery. Time is an area that we are called to be stewards of what God gives. Time. I don't have time for the things of God. Right now's not the time. Well, when is going to be the time? When are you going to have a greater resource? Well, later I'm going to have it. That's so you're going to live on credit. One thing I've always been fascinated with is when we're doing the will of God, is that we're pressed always. But things seem to just flow better. Life seems to be in order, but when something captures our heart, our time, when something demands it and we relinquish, there's something in us that knows that we've done it. If we have the capacity to be honest, our conscience, our something inside is unsettled that this is not a good place. And to recognize that, God's faithful to help us with that. I don't have time for God. I have to make money. I have to play with money. I have to, whatever it is that we're doing, specifically with money, choices, and it can be other areas, but
time is affected, choices in what I do with money. You know, if we get ourselves in a hole, now I can't give to God the way I'd like to because I'm trying to pay off debt, how we use money, or I have to get these things, and therefore we don't give to the things of God. Have you ever given you're sitting there and you think you have a 5 and you pull out a 20, and the offering basket's coming and you're just like, you know, oh, hold on, let me find my 5. Have you ever just thrown the 20 in or the 50 in and it wasn't like you had it to spare, but you got a real quick glimpse of who you were actually giving to? It's like, you know what? I don't know what I've done with that. I'd had fun, whatever. But I know who I'm giving to, and that right there is probably going to do far more for me in the hands of God than anything I would ever do with it. And so you begin to recognize, but choices in how we use money, allowing money to determine the choices in our life. And again, this may speak to other areas of our lives, but this is specifically what Jesus was speaking to in regards to money. The idol of it, perspective of it, stewardship. I'm going to pause for a second. Any thoughts or questions or comments? Michael?
Where your treasure is, there your heart will be also.
Very true. Very true. Perspective in stewardship. Perspective has to be surrendered, and perspective has to be tooled, and perspective has to be heated up because we are very bent to our own perspective. We're very bent to how we see things, and even years down the road, 5 years, 10 years, 20 years, doesn't mean that we're always right just because it seems right to us. Where God may be trying to get a hold of us, wanting to, I want to move in this area of your life. You're not sinning, but that doesn't mean you're handling things the way I would have you. So a humbleness and a teachability, and meaning that we're allowing others to speak into our life, not just others that agree with our perspective, but people that would bring a correction, bring another viewpoint. It's one of the things that I love about being able to go to my pastor, is I want to hear a different viewpoint. I'm not just looking for you to agree with me. It's like, God forbid, I want to hear what you have to say. I want to hear a viewpoint. I want to hear what would you do in this situation? How would you respond? What would be your priority? What would be the way that you would do things? And again and again and again, there is a tempering that takes place. If everything we're doing just always flows in our direction, and I'll probably minister a little bit on that this morning, but that's concerning. I'm always doing the will of God, me and Jesus. It's like sometimes God's going to challenge, and it doesn't mean we're in sin, but He's bringing us well beyond ourselves and well beyond our natural inclination and well beyond the place of where we might even be. Where you are now is not where God wants to leave you. And it's not just a grander ministry or some other facet of ministry. Sometimes it's in the caliber of who we are and a Christ-likeness, how we think, how we perceive, even our own responsibilities in stewardship. All right. I'm going to give out a few more scriptures here. Luke 19:9, Michael. Ezra 8:24 and 25, Javier. And stay there, and then you're going to go to 33 and 34. I'll get both of those. That's easy for you. Luke 16:10, Vic. And hold, I'm going to get Luke 16:11 as well. Malachi 3:9, Norma. And I'll get Luke 16:12 after that. Luke 16:5 through 8, Tracy. Genesis 12:2 and 3, Zanaya. 2 Kings 4:8 through 10, Brittany. 2 Kings 4:8 through 10. And two last ones, Luke 16:4, Sarah. And then I'll get the last one, which is Luke 16:9.
All right. Faithfulness and stewardship. So a foundational principle of stewardship is remembering that this life has a great quality to it, that it is really a test. Life itself is a test. Life itself is testing who we are by its very nature, what we're made of, what we've established, what of us, what of our heart is following after God, what needs more direction or more honing. And the ownership places things in our control as a test. The owner places money, places time, places opportunity before us. Not every opportunity is of God. Not every opportunity that is even to do the things of God is of God. Well, I have an opportunity. It's knowing the will of God to see what we'll do with it. What will you do with this? And what you know I've asked of you, or what you want, or will you seek counsel? Will you get wisdom? What will we do with this? And one of the things, men of God, oftentimes, when they're blessing people, will do something above and beyond. No, Pastor Greg talked about that he would at times give more money when he was in South Africa. He would give more money to people than what they asked for the intent to meet their needs, but then also to see what they would do with what was left over. To see what they would do with the extra that he gave. And sometimes he would watch somebody meet the needs of another person with the extra. Mark that. Sometimes he'd watch somebody make poor decisions with the extra. And so he took all this in to know who he was working with and why, to see what they did with it. Money reveals the heart. Money reveals what's in our heart. It's an accurate indicator of character. That's why living with debt perpetually is actually an indictment on character. There's something in our character if there is a continual debt. Now, understand, things happen. Life happens. People, sometimes sickness, sometimes accident, sometimes injury. Life happens. But when it's decision-based and we weren't saving and we didn't put extra that we had, we spent everything we had, and then an accident happened. Well, if this accident hadn't happened, or if I didn't have to change my oil, like you do every few months, didn't you plan for that? Well, it was my hair. I had to get my hair done. Well, you should plan for that. That happens every so often. But there's planning. It reveals character. Luke 19:9.
And Jesus said to him, "Today salvation has come to this house, because he also is a son of Abraham."
Okay, character was revealed. There was a decision with finances, resources, and this is the restoration to other lives that was evidence of something that took place in this man's life. Ezra 8:24 through 25.
And I separated 12 of the leaders of the priests of Sherbia, and 10 of their brethren with them, and weighed out to them the silver, the gold, and the articles, the offering for the house of our God, which the king and his counselors and his princes and all of Israel who were present had offered.
All right, Ezra 8:33 through 34.
Now on the fourth day the silver and the gold and the articles were weighed in the house of our God by the hand of Meremoth, the son of Uriah the priest, and with him was Eleazar, the son of Phinehas. With them were the Levite, Josabad, the son of Jeshua, and Nodiah, the son of Benaiah. With the number and weight of everything, all the weight was written down at the time. The children of those who had been carried away captive, who had come from captivity, offered burnt offerings to the
34?
just 34?
Yeah. And so by number and weight of every one, and all the weight was written at that time. So here's something handed, and here's an account. Here's something given, and here's an account. There's time given to us. There's opportunity given to us, but there's resources given to us which reveal our character. What do we do with it? And what is our perspective as we do what we do with it? What is our view? Is it all ours? I've given to the Lord what's his, and now the rest is mine. How much of a grip does it have on us? How much are we ready to release if God has need, or if the offering basket's passed, or if there is a challenge, or when a pledge comes? It's like, how much is our heart striving with these things? And so the foundation of stewardship is faithfulness. And our faithfulness is not just faithful to what we feel, faithful to what I think, but what is my faithfulness as the years go by to God? Not just what have I done in the past. And so that's great. It's a great record that we may have, or it may be a poor record that we can make better, but what have I done? And the foundation of stewardship is faithfulness. Luke 16:10.
He was faithful in the very little things, also faithful in much. And he was dishonest in the very little things, is also dishonest in much.
Okay? So he that is faithful in what is least is also faithful in much. Faithful is a word that means trustworthy, and it's used with this intent. And something that is used as it's intended. Something that is, I've given you this for a specific reason, and you have used it as it was intended. So there's three areas of faithfulness. One is that there is always small or less before there's something larger. Luke 16:10, you can read that again.
He was faithful in the very little thing, is also faithful in much. And he was dishonest in the very little thing, is also dishonest in much.
Okay, so it's rare that we begin with this massive sum, that we begin with a lot. It's very rare that we begin with great responsibility in life or with what we're entrusted with. We're given small amounts and sometimes seemingly insignificant amounts. And it's very interesting that people, it's possible to have very little and just blow through it because people think it doesn't matter. I've only got this little amount, so what does it matter what I do with it? Well, it matters a great deal, because depending on what we do with it is actually a revealing of character, a revealing of who we are, and it's oftentimes just a test. Insignificant responsibilities are often a test. Here's a little amount. What are you going to do? Pastor Greg, given that little extra. It's like, okay, what are you going to do with this little extra amount that has been given to you? And a revealer, a test. If we can't be trusted with a little, we can't be trusted with a lot. And so it's very true, but there's something in human nature. It's like, well, that was only $2, but if I had lots of money, I wouldn't be doing that with thousands and thousands. But the character is the same. The percentage would be the same. If you have, $2, 2 cents, $2, it's $20, whatever it is, going on up by degree. And there is a unique truth that the financial comes before the spiritual. The financial foundations often come before the spiritual. Luke 16:11, Vic.
Therefore, if you have not been faithful in the use of earthly wealth, who will entrust the true riches to you?
All right, so this is speaking of two things. It's speaking of tangible assets, and then he's speaking of spiritual wealth. He's speaking of things that are the spiritual facets, and money crosses boundaries. Money affects spiritual dimensions in our life. Money affects spiritual places. It affects who we are. How we handle money is of great importance. Malachi 3:9.
You are cursed with a curse, for you have robbed me, even this whole nation.
Right, here's this truth coming to bear. You've wrongly handled money, and now you're cursed. You didn't handle it the way you were supposed to. You were not faithful with it, and now there's a curse. Something spiritual has been released in your life that is contrary. It'll affect your finances. It will cause a poverty. It will cause an effect upon you. And he says even the whole nation. So the small before the large, the financial before the spiritual, and then also another man's before you get your own. Luke 16:12.
not been faithful in the use of that earthly wealth which belongs to another, whether God or man, and of which you are a trustee, who will give you that which is your own?
All right, so this is us. We working for someone else. You use the things that belong to another. And we're learning with this. We're learning how to handle money. What God puts in our hands, it's very interesting that how He views that. We oftentimes, when we come to Christ, we get saved, and God blesses us, and we have resources. We can get a car. We can pay for an apartment. We can buy clothes. We can do different things. We can go out. We have a life that is more conducive sometimes. And not everybody that gets saved is doing poorly. There's people that are doing well. But to begin to understand more and more the reality that this is actually God's. He asks for 10%. He said, that's mine. But He has the right to ask for offerings besides, and He can ask for what He wants in that, and recognizing that we're stewards. And our true heart is one that would be faithful towards Him. We work for someone else, and we use things that belong to another. And this is faithfulness in stewardship. I'm going to pause here. It has that, when you got saved, did you have a grasp of stewardship towards God? What was a breakthrough? What began to give you a perspective? Did the tithe? What gave a Nana?
I just sort of tried once, as a new Christian, I was tithing, cool, but I was challenged to go, okay, I have this. To me, it was a lot. It was probably $300. That's all I had in the world. And I said, it's not enough to do what I wanted to do with it anyway. And I was really scared, but I just tried it. I just tested out. Like, that was not a tithe, that was an offering aside. And the amount that God just blessed me back, spiritually, and physically, like financially. I just tested it.
Okay.
And saw.
So taking God at His word. God said this. I'm like, all right, I'm going to trust you. Prove me in this. Try me in this. Britt.
I remember in one of my previous jobs when I was like praying for a raise and it didn't look like it was going to happen. Because like I guess like people in like a part-time position in that company weren't supposed to get raises at all.
Yep.
And God challenged me to put all the money that was left in my wallet into the offering, and like I could physically like feel it like leave my hand as I put it into the basket. Like I'm just like, oh, okay. But by the next church service, I had a victory report of $1 raise an hour.
Praise God.
So.
Praise God. A lot of times so faithfulness and stewardship, God is going to take us past, going to take you and I past where we are right now. You know, we hear it with new converts, like, okay, I'm going to trust God and I'm going to tithe. And those of us that have lived for God for a while, we rejoice with them, but we already know it. And then the offering, we're going to do an offering. It's like, okay, and I'm going to pledge. And it's like, okay, and we've done that, many of us, for years. And so it's very easy to think we've capped out, unless God really needs something, then He'll tap me. But where does He want to bring us past where we are? What does He want to do that's beyond? What is a heart perspective? What is a mindset that is beyond the place we're at? I saw two hands. Norm.
I think we need to be careful because it's not always one-for-one return when we obey God in those places. And it's great when that happens. I've seen it in my own life. But for me personally, before I got saved, I could not hold on to money to save my life. If it was in my hand, it was spent. So I think a bigger thing for me was that God taught me and helped me as I was faithful in tithes and offerings and whatever, that I no longer, He gave me the ability to to hold on to what I needed to hold on to and not just spend it. So if you look at that over the years,
That's huge.
that's a huge return.
Yeah.
Without ever, if I had never seen a check come in the mail or
Yep.
groceries at the door or whatever, if I'd never seen that, I still have gotten so much out of it, you know.
Very good. Very good. Mike?
Yeah, a couple of things. We weren't tithing, we weren't even married yet, but I got saved first. And I would throw some money in, and then it was explained to me that God says, try me in this. Well, we were in a lot of debt together, each one of us individually. But we started to tithe right after we got married, and we didn't have the money. When I found out her finances, I was like in shock, but we got out of debt. And part of it was we were watching the other people in the church be blessed. Like Rich, he was driving, I don't think he was even driving yet, the trash truck, and he was going to school, and he progressed. And then watching Javier, who had absolutely nothing to continually building on what he didn't have, but he got, and he got more. And well, with him in particular, we could tell he was anointed from the get-go. I told him that when we still had the Dodge truck and I was driving him for service, that he was special. He had something, and he still does, and he knows that. But what I'm saying is that we could see it in other people, and we were like, how about us? And we started to tithe and make offerings besides, and it was still early on in our salvation where I was moved. I tend to be a giver, and I was taking guys from Job Corps and getting them clothes and stuff, but I was using a credit card, and I was impressed to get out of debt. That's why I parked the bike, and the bike was a lot of my life up to that point, and I parked it, and I had to walk by it every day, going to and from work. And God was pressing me to get out of debt, and He's brought us to a point now where we have more than we ever even thought we could get. And it was just through faithfulness and trying to be sensitive to what God wanted us to do. We've made some mistakes. I did a bankruptcy, I co-signed, and I knew that wasn't God's will, but it was something that I wanted to do for my son. But He took us out of that and accelerated our life because I repented of that. And I've been trying to be sensitive to what He wants in our lives. And like we had discussed the retirement, and I said, oh, I don't have the money to do what I want to do, but this is what I want to do. And I kept praying about it, and we have the money now to do what we wanted to do, but I'm still seeking God to know if He really wants us to do that or something else.
Very good.
And so, we're going to say He blessed us.
A to Z. Hallelujah. God's faithfulness and our faithfulness in stewardship really does matter. And so small before big, financial before the spiritual, and another man before your own. Another man's before you get what's yours. It says, who shall give you that which is your own? God will. God will give. You and I are faithful. God will give to us more and more what He can trust us with. And again, as Norm said, it does not mean we get, we give at the beginning of the week or we give on Sunday, we're going to see it by Friday, or we're going to, that's how it's going to be. But God is always faithful. And sometimes it's in areas that are far greater than just money and the resources of that. So we can have a great confidence as we're faithful in our stewardship. Again, principles of stewardship, faithfulness in stewardship. We're going to stop this morning. We're going to get ready for service. So Lord bless you.